So of course, humans have progressed further and faster in places that have cheaper and more energy. And so, if we really want to see that change happen in Africa, we just need to build energy.
Yeah.
Everything else comes after that. Build energy and make it available and make it cheaper, right? That's all you need to do. And even though Bitcoin mining is probably the most boring of the things that we talk about with Bitcoin, it can probably do more for the progression of humans in this world than anything else because it brings energy.
Yeah. Erik, about a week ago, you didn't expect to be here, did you?
No, I mean, it was, I was down in Argentina?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, we're down in Argentina at the BitConf, and you were, hey, what do you think about, coming up to El Salvador? And I was like, what? Yeah, anyway, fortunately, my wife agreed, and here I am. Yeah, I did not expect to be here. When I got here yesterday, I told you, I was like, I can't believe I'm actually here.
That's what I love about the Bitcoin space. We ran into you at the HRF event that they were having on the side thing, and just like, hey, you should come. And it's ironically the very beginning of our project when we were just getting started, we went to that LeBitConf conference. That was the first one we went to. We were expecting to go there to find out about the other circular Bitcoin economies and learn from them, only to be told that you guys are the only one that's doing this. So, but
what year was that?
That was 2019.
Gosh, wow.
Yeah.
Was LeBitConf more Bitcoin than altcoins at that point?
Yes. It's continually gone downhill. I mean, I love the guys still, but yeah, it was. And you had a lot of just like OG Bitcoin speakers. Andreas Anopoulos, I can never pronounce his name, but he was like, I think he opened up, and they had quite the,
They had a good. I actually thought the content on stage was a lot of really good Bitcoin conversations. It was just like the expo area and everything around it was very much everything else. So I think I felt like that, at least the talks that I went to were some really good ones.
Yeah. No, they have really good content. I mean, Argentina is just very crypto. I mean, very, very shitcoin. And that's because they can just print money out of thin air. They're willing to give sponsorship money. So I definitely feel like in the exhibit hall and that stuff, it's tilted that way. But it didn't start that way, and I feel like it's kind of gradually over the years morphed that way. But I still have love for that conference. That's where the first one we got to start. It ran into Peter McCormick was I think hosting that year, and I ran into him and said, hey, you should come see what we're doing in El Salvador. And thinking he'd come like maybe a year from then. He's like, all right, well, how about Wednesday? And I was like, oh.
Yeah, let me get back. Let me make
so
sure
just like you
just
tell people, you tell them, and they come. And
well, when you're in this, like, this is a long way from Kenya.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, if I don't go now, I don't know if I'll ever go.
Hey guys, just a brief interruption. We'll get back to the exciting show here, but I just want to really ask a favor that you guys could make sure that you're subscribed if you're watching this on YouTube. If you are listening to this on a podcast, please take a second and review this. You don't even have to write a lengthy review or anything at all. Just click the number of stars that you want to give us. It really helps us in the algorithms to make sure people are finding out about what's happening here. All right, back to the show.
Because I'm already on this side, I'm already in South America, it's an easier shot up. So it worked out, right? It worked out because there was LeBitConf and there was SatConf in Brazil, and then there was this. So every weekend there's been a different conference. And
and they had Suriname was going on at the same time. So while you were at SatsConf, I was in Suriname.
What was going on in Suriname?
They were putting on a Bitcoin conference there. Was it Suriname decentralized? So. Yeah, it was. There's a lot of stuff going on in November.
Yeah, it's just like conference season. But yeah, anyway, it's really great to get to El Salvador, and I was flying in. I was like, I had no idea what to expect, and as we were driving from the airport, I was like, feels like the jungle here is trying to get its island back. Like like the jungle is like right there and it has this presence about it. And then there's the beach off to the side as you're driving. And I was like, man, this place is great.
It's right. We're right at the end of the rainy season, so yeah, definitely everything's green and lush, and trees are growing over things.
Yeah.
It's that season. Most people in the Bitcoin space know who you are, but there will obviously be some that will be new to this. So explain a little bit about what you do, just in brief, and then I want to kind of understand your Bitcoin story, how you got into Bitcoin, and then we'll get into more the nuts and bolts of what you guys do.
Yeah. So my name's Erik Hersman. I'm part of the team that runs Gridless. Gridless is out of Kenya in East Africa. And what we do is we look for stranded energy at rural independent power producer sites. And generally what's happened is those rural energy providers, they're only getting about 20 to 30% of the usage of their site, because it just takes a long time for people to really electrify their homes and get the money to do so. So they'll turn on an LED light bulb and charge their phones, and then maybe eventually they'll get a refrigerator or a TV, things like that, and those will take a little bit more energy. But in that whole time, the energy company is expecting to make more money off of everybody, but they're only getting 20 to 30% usage of their power.
And the rest of it's just going to waste.
The rest of it's just being wasted down the river. So stranded energy is really just energy potential that's not being used. And so we come in there and we say, listen, we'll take up the rest of your stranded power, and we'll make Bitcoin off of that, but we won't pay you for it directly. What we'll do is we'll pay you with 30% of the Bitcoin that comes out of it. It's our cost to install, our cost to manage and run, and it's worked out quite well. We kind of the mission for the organization is to push electrification further to the edges in Africa and also help decentralize the Bitcoin network, putting Bitcoin hash power in parts of the world that just didn't exist before. And so we have 6 sites in 3 countries, Kenya, Malawi, and Zambia. And it's been great. I mean, you should see the smiles on the faces of the energy partners as the Bitcoin mining comes on. They see full usage, and then
because that's all incremental revenue for them. They just weren't getting anything before for them.
Right? Yeah, it's real revenue. It helps them cover their own costs. Most of these companies are not sustainable. They're not actually covering their own OpEx, and so the Bitcoin mining, when it comes in, they start receiving that money daily, and they don't get paid daily, by anybody.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden they're getting paid daily. They can think strategically
in
about the
Bitcoin.
business. Yeah, in Bitcoin. So they, it's funny. None of them are Bitcoiners beforehand, right?
Yeah.
And then, so we say, well, this is how we do it. So typically, let me give you the conversation. We come in and we say, okay, so you have stranded power. We could monetize that for you. We could give you like full monetization of your full capacity. And they're like, okay, well, how much will you pay? They're like, well, you pay 7 cents. I'm like, no, we can't pay you 7 cents for your power. Well, what can you pay us? Well, we can't pay you anything. We can monetize it with Bitcoin, and you'll get paid in Bitcoin. And then, an hour later, after we've looked at things around the site, come back and they're like, okay, could you pay us 5 cents? We're like, how much are you being paid now? Well, nothing. Okay, well, would you like to still get nothing, or would you like Bitcoin? Okay, we'll take Bitcoin, right? And so that's how they become Bitcoiners, right? They kind of get like shoved into this box. Okay, I got to get this thing, and then we say, listen, it's really easy to liquidate that Bitcoin. If you want, the local currency, the shilling or the kwacha, you can liquidate it. If you want dollars or euros or whatever other currency, you can liquidate it. So you can do that. We don't suggest that you do. We suggest that you hold on to it until the time that you actually need it. And some of them do, and some of them don't. It's their decision.
Well, the ones that have been holding are probably happy this last week.
Goodness. Some of them have been holding it, and they are very happy. They've made like 4x the type of revenue they thought they were going to make. And we've made some believers out of some people.
I love to see that when they have that positive surprise. It can go the other way in a down market, and then they're like calling you up like, hey,
what's going on here? Yeah.
Somebody's stealing money out of my account. And you're like, no, the price is going down in dollar terms. You still have the same amount of Bitcoin.
Well, the funny thing is, like, we entered into this whole business during the bear market when it was like $17,000 a Bitcoin. So yeah, I mean, you've seen some volatility as we've gone up.
Yeah.
It's gone up. And so the timing has been well, has done well for us.
So what made you push into this? Like, were you in the energy space before? Were you in the Bitcoin space? Like, how did Bitcoin enter into the equation for you?
I guess there's two things that no. First is no, we're not in the energy space, and the second thing was I'd wanted to do Bitcoin mining since about 2011, and had never done it.
Since 2011.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, we're tech guys, built the big tech space in Nairobi. We had a supercomputer cluster. We talked about doing Bitcoin mining on it, and never did. And so I've always thought about that. In 2014, we thought about doing it again, but we just started another company, so we said no, we got to focus on this. In 2017, I was about to buy my own miners and just stuff them in a closet at the office because power was included in the bill. And then I ended up buying some real estate for the family instead. And so every time I had done something else. And I was like, finally, we had built another company that we did public Wi-Fi, and we had deployed that into very rural areas, slum areas in the city, transportation networks.
And this was in Kenya.
Kenya, Rwanda, a couple of countries.
Okay.
And we had sold that company. I was like, I'm going to do this mining thing. But I only got there after I actually started reading and listening to things about Bitcoin, actually all of crypto. I was listening to everything about what was going on. I finally kind of clicked, okay, crypto is really, generally crypto is about like, how can I make money fast and just, I don't care about the product really, just how can I make money fast? And I built my career off of long-term thinking around building businesses or organizations that had a real long lifespan of growth. So it takes longer to build a foundation, but once you have that foundation, you have something really solid to stand on. And I realized that that's what Bitcoin was. Bitcoin was the slow burn, but you could build a foundation on a business on this foundation and make something of it. And because we've been doing hardware and infrastructure deployment across multiple countries in Africa, rural areas, it's like, well, we know hardware, we know software, we know infrastructure. We could do Bitcoin mining and maybe have an added benefit that we're probably going to be better at than most people. And one of the hardest things with Bitcoin mining is your connectivity, especially in these rural areas, and that's kind of what we know.
And just for people that don't know your backstory, like operating in Kenya and Africa was nothing new for you. That was where you grew up. That's home for you.
Yeah, I mean, as you can tell from looking and listening, I'm from Africa. No, so I grew up as a missionary kid. My parents were linguists in South Sudan, so I moved there when I was 2 years old. War got bad when I was 6.
They chose the easy country to go to.
Yeah, no hard mode there at all. So they were linguists, and they were working on a language called the Toposa that was it takes 15 to 20 years to translate a language. So you start with just learning the language, then you have to create an alphabet for it. And then
so this was a language that never been written.
Right. Yeah, it was only an oral language.
Yeah.
There's no writing in it at all. So yeah, learn the language, create an alphabet, teach people how to read and write their own language, and then finally they would translate that into the Bible. And so it would take a long time. But we were way out in the bush at that time, and we didn't have any energy either. Growing up, it was just whether you were pumping your own water or you had paraffin lamps in your house, that was it. And eventually we had to leave because the war got bad in Sudan. Moved to Kenya. Yeah. And Kenya really became home. And so I've been living in Kenya. So I lived in Kenya until I graduated high school. Came to the U.S. for university. And then went back over after I got married and had my kids. Went back over and started building tech businesses in Kenya. So
and was that because you felt like, hey, there's more opportunity in Africa, or you just felt like, no, this feels like home and this is where I want to live? What was kind of driving that?
I mean, I know you like watching your own kids grow up. I'm guessing you're thinking about these kind of things.
Oh yeah,
too.
I'm wondering, my kids, are they going to wind up in El Salvador again?
Yeah.
Are they going to be in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Or what's going to?
When you have kids whose parents are and kind of background is from one geography and they grew up in the other one, and that's kind of home for them. We call third culture kids, right?
Yeah.
They in finding and identifying with where is home and what I'm going to do always is hard. So for me, it was partially that. My wife was also one of these American kids who grew up in Africa and Kenya as well. And so for us, when we got married, it's like we always wanted to move back, but it just needed to make sense to do so. And I was pretty active in technology, was, doing a lot of writing at the time about what was going on, but also building software in the space. And so that the opportunity happened, so we could move back. And in reality, the second part was very true. Like the opportunity for, like in these emerging markets, there is massive opportunity. It takes capital. It takes a lot of hard work. You are playing that game on hard mode compared to everybody else in the West. But if you can build something, there's a massive market for it.
Well, there's less competition and there's more like demand for these things. Like in the U.S., you may have 20 competitors, but you're the only game in town a lot of times. But I see that all the time in El Salvador. It's like, I feel like there's way more opportunity here than in the U.S.
Well, it still comes down to execution, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you're doing a tire shop or you're doing a software company, right? Like execution, customer service, product, market fit, all have to work, right? But if you can focus and do those and execute on those things, then you have a chance of success here that can far outstrip your peers in the U.S. or Europe, right? And there's less rules where we work, and that's both good and bad. So that allows you to do things that might be harder elsewhere. But I always think when you're in emerging markets, the innovation is really not in the technology; it's in the use of that technology, the business cases for it. Right? We see that in Africa with even Ushahidi, one of the first tech companies that I built with some other Kenyans, was that we were taking this mashup of mapping information and SMS messages during crisis and putting them on a map so people could tell what was going on in real time. Both of those technologies, when we built this tool, Google Maps was 4 or 5 years old at the time, and SMS messages were 15 or 20 years old. So there's nothing new here in the tech, but the application of that tech into a new way is where the innovation in emerging markets happens. And so I was like, okay, there's something here, and so let's move back. We were moving back to build the tech hub, the iHub in Nairobi. So that became this, just juggernaut of startup guys, and nobody believed in tech in Africa at the time. And so then all of a sudden, it took 3 years, but then VCs start showing up, and it really became the innovation capital of Africa. Nairobi was just this hub of great stuff. So yeah, all these things were happening. So I've been involved in this tech scene in Africa for a while, and so going from that into Bitcoin mining first of all, knowing about Bitcoin very early, because as tech guys, we knew about it in 2010, right? But we didn't do anything about it in 2011 when we had the chance. But so finally doing something with Bitcoin wasn't that big of a stretch. We knew about it already. We just hadn't done anything yet.
So when you made that jump, you had come off, you had just sold, when we were talking prior to this, you had sold a company that provided internet service on buses in Kenya, and you had kind of gotten out of that, and then you decided, okay, we're going to make this jump and actually make this happen. What was the learning curve of understanding the way that these grid operators were set up, understanding the economics of it? What are assumptions that you made kind of going into it that now you look back and kind of laugh at yourself, and how has that kind of played out, the learning curve?
Well, how everybody talks about the going down a rabbit hole on Bitcoin, right? I didn't think we needed to go down a rabbit hole on energy. Just you go find the energy guy, you lock in a deal, and then you just still deal with the mining. But we did have to go down a rabbit hole on energy as well, and so I didn't know anything really about it, and it became a really curious thing for me, because there's this, the statistics across the world are that there's 1.1 billion people who do not have electricity. That doesn't mean that they don't have affordable electricity. It means they don't have any electricity. 600 million of them are in Africa, so that's over half of the population on the continent. And so it kind of made me ask some questions about energy. I'm like, why?
Why? Yeah.
Why?
No, that's what I'm asking right now. I'm thinking, why would you have that concentration in that, and how could it be that large percentage of the population that doesn't have access?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, right? Surely this is a market opportunity. Surely there's something here. And so I started doing a bunch of reading, and ended up reading 15 or 17 research papers on mini grids, independent power production, all this kind of stuff across Africa, and ended up writing my own piece on it called energy and Bitcoin mining in Africa. It's a short piece. Writing for me is a way to help me kind of understand things. And so, wrote this document, and I was like, oh, I get it. It's a bad investment. That's why I should not. It's pretty simple. So, going back to the original problem, right? Which is, let's say you say you want to build a 1 megawatt run-of-river site. That's going to cost you $2 million, okay, to build that 1 megawatt site. If you can only get 20% usage, will you ever make your return on investment? The answer is no, right? You have to get to a certain threshold of usage for it to make enough money to make sense. And it's really hard to do that in
even when it's being powered by a river where there's obviously no cost to that. There's no input costs.
Well, there's CapEx costs that you're trying to recoup.
Yeah.
Right? As well. And there's OpEx costs of line workers, of meters that have to go in, buying transformers, all kinds of stuff, repairs on your facilities. So, there's OpEx as well. And so what has been happening, because nobody had a real business case to make these things work, what had happened is all this concessionary financing was coming in. Not a lot. It takes 5 years sometimes. What
do you mean by concession?
So it's like
financing?
like grant funding, or from
like USAID,
AFDB, African Development Bank, the Rockefeller Foundation, all these grant giving institutions. Okay. And so what would happen is, these guys would give money, and there's this, I call it the willful delusion between the energy developer and the energy financier, who is saying, yeah, we're going to all make enough money. Like, they all know it's not going to make any money. And I'm sure there's some who are making enough money. We have not come across them yet. And what was happening was all this. So these guys would go out and do a feasibility study, find specifically just fantastic areas to build energy, whether it's solar, wind, hydro, whatever, right? And take them 5 years to find the financing for it. They eventually go out there and build it. It takes another 2 years to build energy. And then, instead of getting, 20, 30% in 2 years, it takes them 5, maybe 10. One site we know 15 years later, and they were at 36% usage. So, you can't run a business and make enough money when you don't have the full capacity usage of your assets. And so, this whole time they've been missing a specific thing, which is called an anchor tenant, a business that really kind of offsets the majority usage of the energy. And, in the West, it's the same thing. So, it'll be a steel factory or some large pharmaceutical or, just some big energy taker. And that's what offsets everybody's grids. So meanwhile, the national power grids in each country have gone about as far as they will go too, because it doesn't make sense for them to build really big power lines into these rural areas that have low density housing. And so that's what actually is going on in Africa. You have these small pockets of people, but it doesn't make sense for the national grid to go in there. And the mini grid developers, the small independent power producers, can't find the financing because they don't have a good business model. And so all of a sudden we come along and we're like, hey, can we use your extra power? And they're like, yeah, sure. And we get there, we start doing this deal, they start making some money, and all of a sudden we're looking at it and we're saying, hey, you know what? If you pair Bitcoin mining with energy development, you can get a 5 to 7 year ROI. Whereas in the other case, they were looking for a 30-year ROI. So it's this complete difference in how things happen. And so that was what my report said. And I was like, okay, so somebody please go start doing these things together. So instead of, right, what we do with finding stranded energy is being the buyer of last resort, right? Everybody gets the energy first. There's a chance here for Bitcoin to be the buyer of first resort, right? And to actually, be one of the reasons that the energy gets financed. But nobody was doing it. So a year after that, we started doing some feasibility studies of our own and saying, hey, we could build this energy, and why don't we just do it ourselves and show people how it's done? And so we're on that path now. So anyway, but
have you guys built any, or is it all right now you're using existing systems?
We're using existing systems with energy partners, but we haven't broken ground on anything. But we have 3 sites that we've gotten approvals on. So
that's exciting.
Pretty soon we'll see. Yeah.
And how many people will those sites bring energy to?
We'll see. They generally have a couple thousand homes around them.
Okay.
But our job is to build the energy and do the Bitcoin mining, and then we'll just wholesale that energy to. Okay, here's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. Okay, I'm going to get a little nerdy on you with the numbers.
Please.
Okay, how much does Bitcoin mining pay? No, like most Bitcoin miners don't even know. So you get paid about. I mean, the numbers are about 7 to 10 cents. That's for most days of Bitcoin mining per kilowatt hour that you burn. Okay. So if I'm running, let's call it 10 cents, just I'll take the higher number on those. I'm being paid 10 cents per hour, per kilowatt I'm using. Each miner, let's say it was taking 3 kilowatts. So I should be making 30 cents on that per hour. That's approximately right. So if I'm being paid 10 cents and the cost of energy for the community in these locations is 24 to 96 cents per kilowatt, what's really interesting is that Bitcoin is actually the market maker. Bitcoin sets the price, right? It says, well, energy is worth 7 to 10 cents. Let's call it 10 cents. So energy is worth 10 cents. If I were to set up a wholesale, like a pipe out of my facility and say, anybody who's willing to spend 12 cents can buy it from me, and I'll just turn off miners. Shouldn't I do that? Yeah, because I'm going to make more money, right?
Yep.
And that's the beautiful thing. That is the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, is that it sets the value of that energy in that local market, but it does it on a global scale, right? Because we're tapping into the same global network of Bitcoin. And all of a sudden, you can lower the price of energy for everybody in that community. And somebody can build a mini grid off of that and supply that service to them.
But do these mini grids make economic sense at 10 cents, 100% capacity? Is that?
Oh yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
Even then, they have an ROI of 5 years.
Okay, really?
Which is fantastic. So it's like a no-brainer to do this, right? That's the beautiful thing about this is like it can be done and it should be done. But what's weird about it is that the energy financiers have this model that they've been doing for 50 years. And so for them, this idea of financing something that has Bitcoin attached to it, which is this kind of bad word to them, is kind of complicated, right? They're like, that's not really a financeable vehicle, right? Like we can't really, like lend against that, So we actually sat down and we were trying to do this thing where we say, okay, listen, if we took $20 million, you could build 10 megawatts of run-of-river hydro, and that's really good, right? And we were talking to some of our own investors about that, and they're like, you're a Bitcoin company, right? Why are you denominating this in fiat? And so we're like, wait, what do you mean? Well, if you denominated that $20 million, which I think at that time was worth about 300 Bitcoin, you could leverage that Bitcoin. There's Swiss banks that will take a loan on that and give you 60% of it. And so we did some discovery. Like, sure enough, that is the case. So the funny thing is this: so you end up taking Bitcoin on the front end, then being the financial reactor to build more energy. How that works is this, right? Let's say I can get a 60% LTV with a 9% interest rate. That means I could draw down on $20 million worth of Bitcoin in year one, right? So that's today. It's who knows what it is today with the Bitcoin price ripping, but let's call it 250 Bitcoin. With that 250 Bitcoin, it's worth $20 million. I can pull down 12 million, 60% of that. I don't need 20 million. I don't need 12 million. I need 3 million. So I draw down that much. But the next year, that same 250 Bitcoin is now worth 20 million. It's worth 27 million. I can still pull down 60% of it. And the next year it's worth 35 or 38. And the next year it's worth 52. And the next year it's worth, it keeps going up in value. And every once in a while, you're going to have an 80% drop.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to make sure you can cover for that so you don't get margin called.
Don't get liquidated.
Yeah, right. And so, there's this, but that's the thing. Bitcoin itself is the financing engine. Bitcoin mining is the profitability for that. And after you've been going for about 5-6 years, you're actually making enough Bitcoin that you're paying off all your margin. And then you're also adding more Bitcoin into the top. So now you're getting closer to 251 Bitcoin, 258 Bitcoin the next year. So you actually add more in. You have ability to build endless energy. It's unbelievable. And run-of-river hydro is the cheapest LCOE. So, like the cheapest cost of building energy of any of the energy types. So yeah, we just think it's this perfect vehicle. So we're going after that a little bit and saying, hey, listen, we're happy to share this model so anybody else can do it, because we think that there's more than enough energy that needs to be built. Not one company should do it or can do it. Number two, we're going to do it. And that's the big exciting thing for where we're going right now.
Is there a reason that it works better like in Africa than other places, or you think this is something that is, even a place like El Salvador that could be?
It works anywhere that there is a demand for more energy at cheaper prices. All right. In Africa, it just so happens that we're like one of those places that has the most. There's like 400 gigawatts of possible energy, of just hydro energy, in sub-Saharan Africa, and it just so happens that this is the one place on Earth that needs it most, and has the most pockets of populations that can use it as well.
And is energy costs generally expensive in Africa, or what's the?
Yeah, it is. So I don't know what it costs here.
El Salvador's pretty expensive. I mean, we
Do you know
pay
what you're paying?
on the retail level, like as a
Yeah.
end user, we're probably paying, I don't know, 30 cents.
Oof.
Yeah.
So you could
Kilowatt
use it
hour.
here.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Imagine if you had an independent power producer here that was just built a run-of-river hydro.
Yeah.
You should be able to buy that for 12 to 15 cents.
No, I mean that would be no brainer. My power bill would be
You'd be very happy.
cut in a fraction. Yeah.
Yeah, so the same
I'd
thing.
be embarrassed to tell you what my electric bill is here. We like our air conditioning. So it's,
So no, in Kenya it's really bad. It's 22 cents in the city in Nairobi. It's like generally 30 to 90 cents in the rural areas.
okay. So similar to.
Different countries it's
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
Some of them subsidize it, so it's a little cheaper. And if they ever remove that subsidy, there'd be riots. So they always have to play some games with the pricing.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally it's pretty expensive to get your energy. And like even in the U.S., I think the average price in the U.S. is 12 cents.
Well, I'm originally from San Diego, so I think we had like the second highest electricity costs outside of, I think, Hawaii. But I think we paid, it was 35 cents, I think, a kilowatt hour in San Diego. Like it's insane.
I mean, that is crazy, right? Like, and there's other places that are probably paying 6 cents.
Yeah, for sure.
No, actually, the whole reason I agreed to come on and out to Latin America to speak at any of these conferences was I was like, I think there's a potential to do what we're doing in Africa, in Latin America. We will never do it. It's not our thing.
Yeah.
Like we're in Africa, and that's where we're going to stay. And I want to share the model so that people can do what we do. And
No,
so
I
I'm
look at
hoping
El Salvador. I mean, there's lots of. I always assumed you needed huge rivers. You could put big old dams up, but seeing the little like streams that you guys
I don't know
operate
if
on.
you can pull up that first picture of. This one. Like this is our first site. That's a 50.
I mean, there's all kinds of those type of size. I mean,
Yeah.
every little town here on the coast has one of those running through the middle of it. So,
Yeah, it's like this is a 50 kilowatt site.
Yeah.
30, the community was using about 30 kilowatts of it, and so we were playing with 20 kilowatts, which remember each Bitcoin miner is using about just over 3 kilowatts, so that's 6 miners, right? And you should be able to do this in multiple locations, and it doesn't have to be like, these kind of sites with this type of river. You could even do them in series, so you could have maybe 300 kilowatts with 5 of these little
just different points going down the hill.
5 turbines run along the route, right? Like so you can do a lot of different things, and there's some heavy capex that goes into building any of these things, but if you have the capex to do it and you can own an energy asset and it change the way you do your own business or Bitcoin mine and do KYC free Bitcoin, that's fantastic too. So that last site, you'll notice that they've added solar. So this was we had a 40-year drought, like the worst drought we'd had in 40 years in Kenya. So we weren't getting enough water on the river. And this is run-of-river hydro, so there's about 200 meters there where the water is taken out of the river and then put back into it. But they've also added solar. So our power partner here added solar because they needed more during the day. We're not the only big tenant. There's also a tea factory on it, like a cell phone tower or some others, and they needed to make sure that even during the drought, they still had enough energy. The next site is, this one's in Zambia, and you can see the forebay there where the water gets held before it goes down the pipe into the turbine. And you can see the river behind it, and it goes right back into the river there. And if you look really closely down there at the bottom, you can see a 20-foot Bitcoin mining container that's about to be installed. And in these places, a lot of times there's nowhere to stay, so we end up just camping on the side of the river and you know, working all day and late into the night. Nothing else to do.
So how often do you go out to those sites?
So once a site is set up, maintenance, so we have a software system called Gridless OS, and Gridless OS allows us to do a lot of remote maintenance and management. And so we can tell in real time when our miners are having issues. Anytime we have an issue, we have to go to the site, and we train up some of the power people on site to do first level support. This is another image. This is one of our field teams. So right before I went to Argentina and saw you, I was in the field in Zambia with our team here, and they were doing repairs on a bunch of the miners that had some issues. Turns out that we do probably, I don't know, I'd put us up there with the top in the world of real-time demand response. So what real-time demand response means is that when anybody in the village decides to turn on their power, or let's say a grain mill turns on, or whatever it is, right? Somebody starts irrigating their field. That means there's a draw on the power. And once there's a draw on the power, we know immediately. And so we can turn off miners within seconds. Okay. So that means that we're cycling through which miners are being turned off and off during the day. The general peaks are a little bit in the morning, but generally between like 6 and 10 p.m. That's when the peak energy usage.
Of energy usage outside the miners. Like
outside the miners is being used. Okay. Yeah. And so, but that real-time demand response means that we're doing, our miners are going up and down, up and down, up and down all the time. Now, if you know anything about miners, which you probably don't, but I'll break it down for you. There's like 100 or more chips on a hash board, and that's an aluminum hash board. And so what we're doing is they get really hot when they're running, and then we turn them off and they get cold, and then they get turned on again and they get hot. So we were coming across these errors from thermal cycling, just turning miners on and off too much. They're not made for this. These are like the world's worst computers, right? The most poorly made computers. And so they were causing a lot of issues, and we finally figured it out. And we went back out into the field and started fixing them all here. And a big thanks to actually Epic. Epic was this group out of Canada that makes a different control board. So we pop out the What's Miner control board, and we put in the Epic control board, and that allows us to control more things. Okay. And that's what allowed us to fix all these.
And how did you solve that issue? Was it?
Well, so basically we were going in there and we're popping off individual chips and soldering on new ones. I mean, it takes time, and it's like, it just doesn't seem cost effective. And finally we realized if we switched out the What's Miner control board with the Epic control board, the Epic control board would let us just route around certain chips.
Okay.
And the What's Miner control board wouldn't. And that allowed us to still run the miner at lower efficiency, but still run the miner. And so we started just, everywhere we were getting those, we started popping out those What's Miner boards and putting in the Epic control boards.
So I'm just curious, when at these sites, like what is your uptime for the miners? Like, and I know you can underclock them or overclock them, but yeah. Like in general, what is the percentage of time that you want to make sure they're running?
I mean, my general rule of thumb is 18 hours. I like to have a miner on for 18 hours. Now, listen, when you're going through like a drought and you don't have water, you might have only 40% of your miners running for a month, and you just got to deal with that. That's just part of the business. And of course, if you're a large miner and you're running off fixed energy costs, you could never make that work. But we're running off a different model, which is we pay on revenue share. And so if the miners aren't running because there's no water, we make less money during that time, but we don't have a fixed operational cost that we have to cover either. So we can make it work. And that is one of our competitive advantages globally.
Is there any other miners that are using that model, or do you think you guys are the only ones that are doing that?
There probably is others who are doing that. I don't know if there are. I don't know them if there are, but I would assume that somebody's done that kind of a deal before.
And are there other mining companies that are running off these kind of smaller power generation sources?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a lot of independent miners. So I've seen it in different places. So in the U.S., you'll find guys who have their own property and they built their own little hydro site on it.
So they just have a stream or something that goes to their property and they pump one of these up?
Well, and I mean, they're not a small thing to pop up. Yeah. They might build a 2 megawatt little site on their own property and they just use it themselves for mining. You'll see it in our friends in Nigeria at Trojan, they have, I think they're running maybe 2 megawatts now of energy off of hydro. It's not off small sites like this. It's off of a big hydro. There's my favorite story of all. Actually, I think of every Bitcoin mining story I've ever heard, the one in Lebanon is my favorite. So these guys, there's a great story about this. I'll find the link for you. Is that they, Lebanon's having all kinds of power issues, but also didn't have any real government to stop things, and so guys were going and just overloading the grid. Finally, the authorities that there were really
with miners or with other things.
With miners.
With miners.
Yeah,
okay.
sorry, with miners. Were overloading the grid. They would actually just go to the places where energy was made, and so like they had these big hydro sites, and they go there and plug them into the grid in these villages and towns, and so finally the authorities that there were really said, we got to shut this down. So they went in there and they started just confiscating things, getting these guys kicked out. But a couple of them remained. And the ones that remained did this really intelligent thing. They went around and they started measuring the transformers in the towns and saying which ones are underperforming or are running too much. And they said, okay, well, the ones that are running too much, let's not go there, but let's go and talk to the people who live around this other transformer. And then they would pay them to put 2 miners in their house, another 3 in this guy's garage, another 2 here, and they would basically help stabilize the grid in that town by making full utilization of each transformer. And so they were allowed to stay and do their mining. And it's a really curious. But
were they paying market price for the electricity, or were they paying under market because Lebanon was subsidizing power costs, or what?
So the household member was still paying for whatever power they were using, and I don't know what the pricing was. So you'll have to forgive me on that. But they were paying the owner of the house just I think it was like a fixed rate. They would pay them $20 a month or whatever to run each miner, and then they would just take all the Bitcoin that they earned, and that's the creativity that you get in Bitcoin mining. Like Bitcoin mining is one of those things that it's like pouring water on an uneven floor, right? The water will always go to where it's lowest, where it's cheapest. And so the same thing with Bitcoin mining, right? It's like Bitcoin miners are this creative set that will go after energy in all the weirdest pockets of the world. So for instance, let's talk big mining in Africa. Last year, about 13 months ago now, we had the first Africa Bitcoin Mining Summit. And the representative from Bitmain came and he's like, we will have 500 megawatts of Bitcoin mining in Ethiopia in the next 12 months. He actually said 6 months, but I talked to him after. He's like, maybe in the next year. We had the second Africa Bitcoin Mining Summit last month in Ethiopia, and they had 600 megawatts going.
Wow.
So I sat down and talked to the head of the energy authority there, and I said, how much is operational? He said 600 megawatts. I said, no, I mean actually running, operational. He's like 600 megawatts, and we'll have 700 megawatts by next month. So Bitcoin miners realized that you could get 2.5 cent to 3 cent energy there, and they just came. 19 companies were approved. 11 of them are operational. A lot of them are Chinese. There's a couple like Canadian or Eastern European or Ethiopian. And I've been to the sites. There'll be like a 60 megawatt Bitmain site running hydro miners here, and then 2 to 8 megawatt site run by an Ethiopian air cooled miner here, QRB Labs. They're fantastic. And then they share a fence line with another 40 megawatt air cooled mining site that's owned by somebody completely different. And that's just one substation, and it's insane.
So while you were in South America, did you visit any mining sites, or
Oh man, I got to go to Paraguay and meet the Penguin guys.
Okay.
So Penguin runs 100 megawatts off of the 14 gigawatt hydro, between Paraguay, Uruguay, and Brazil, and they have just the most amazing site. Of course, we run some pretty out of the way, small stuff. So I'm less like, a kid in a candy store as I'm looking around. This is amazing.
It's the big leagues.
Yeah, and they've got immersion mining here. They've got hydro mining here. They've got air cooled over here. They've got this fantastic little repair facility. I really wanted to see the repair facility. I was like, how is it compared to ours?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same. They have a few nicer tools. Really well built, really well run site. Like they really, the networking connectivity is one of those things that's really hard to do at large scale. And their COO Christian is he used to own an ISP, and so he's really good at that. And so their whole setup is just really clean, really well done. So Penguin in Paraguay was really impressive to me, and I haven't seen any other miners here across Latin America. I'd love to see them, but I was just, I only have so much time on the ground.
Yeah.
Have you been to any mining sites?
I have not been to any mining sites here. I've talked to some of the folks that are working with Volcano Energy, the mining company that they've developed here in El Salvador, and I still don't feel like I understand the economics of it, because the long-term goal is for them to use geothermal, but in the meantime they're putting in wind and solar, which I just, to me, just doesn't make economic sense. But I'm not in the space, so I don't pretend to know.
So yeah, solar is hard to make work, just because you really get about 5 to 6 hours a day of really good solar. And the battery storage to have it run all night is like, it'll 3x your costs, right? It's so expensive. There is a case for a hybrid wind solar, though, if you have a really good wind site, and you get decent daylight sun, then you could make it work, right? I think that could work, and I think it's probably just because geothermal is amazing. We have one of our sites is geothermal, and it's the only thing I know that's better than hydro, besides nuclear, but we're not going to talk about nuclear. So geothermal is amazing, but it's expensive, and you've got to do a lot of digging, and that digging, if you don't get the right pocket of steam, you just got to dig again. So it's lost capex, and that's expensive.
It's kind of like trying to sink oil wells.
I don't know much about that, but yes, probably like it. And so Kenya is one of the top 5 geothermal places in the world. And so we have a ton of geothermal, right? We have over 1 gigawatt just outside of Nairobi, about an hour and a half away. And so we've seen it in real time. It's quite interesting how they built that. And to make it really be valuable, when you're sinking a well, you don't want it to be 5 megawatts. That's too small. You want like 20 megawatts or more. And so, I don't know how the geothermal is working in El Salvador at all. But I can understand that if they wanted to get something quicker, they would do something like solar or wind.
Yeah.
But hydro will take you 2 years to build. Geothermal might take you that or more. At scale, it'll take you a lot more.
Yeah, I'm just curious why they haven't done any of these. Because they have all these rivers that are at least the size that you're working on. That, I mean, there's got to be hundreds of them here.
Yeah, but countries don't want to do this. Countries want to work on big things. Big wants to work on big, right? Big wants to partner with big.
Yeah.
This is small stuff, right? Like, yeah, sure. With like I was saying before, with $20 million, you can build 10 megawatts of hydro, right? If you finance it with Bitcoin, that same $20 million will build you 100 megawatts of hydro. With the first one, you got to go back and get more money to build more, right? With the second one, you don't. It just it's endless energy. So yes, you could do that, but it takes time, right? And it's a new way of thinking about it as well. It's a financing treasury model, right? And I think there's no reason El Salvador couldn't do that. What it screams to me is if there's that much opportunity with non-seasonal rivers, even, or maybe even seasonal.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff though they run year round. So
will it run the same volume year round?
No, I mean the volume definitely is going to trail off.
So I mean, if you could really do that, then why are there not more independent power producers going out there and just saying, "Hey, I'll just build my own power site and mine on it"?
Well, that's what I'm very curious about, because I mean, up until recently, I think it's changed. They put in a big LNG fired plant like a year or two ago, but before that, they were still burning a lot of diesel. I mean, a lot of the energy here was diesel generated, and so
which is
very expensive.
Yeah, I think that at least where we are, it's about 25 cents to make diesel generation work.
So
And
they
that's
had like
expensive.
a mix of like, but I think it was at one time it was I think almost half of it was diesel generated, and they had like 20% was hydro or maybe 15% was hydro and 20% was geothermal, but they had a big component that
Yeah.
was diesel generated. And I just always wondered why there wasn't more small plants like that.
Yeah, I don't know enough about El Salvador to know either, but I would love to know too, because energy has become interesting to me.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating like in Bitcoin we always think of like the base commodity is Bitcoin, but it's not.
It's energy.
Right? It's energy. Energy is what makes Bitcoin, right? It's where every transaction and where every new Bitcoin comes from is this energy that all of us miners are running, and it sets the value of that Bitcoin, and that is the actual true base commodity, right? And so if you can build energy, you always know there's going to be a buyer for it. Now, you didn't before, but now you do, and that is Bitcoin, right? And if you own the energy, then you have the unit economics to make it make sense. I think maybe not this next halving, but the halving after that, I don't see anybody doing mining that's not an energy owner. They just won't have the unit economics to make it make sense.
That makes sense. So I know you guys made a big splash when you guys launched, I think partially because you had some high profile backers. We had a picture there earlier.
Oh, yeah.
I saw Jack Dorsey there, and I believe my buddy Miles was on that trip there.
Yeah, there's another picture with I don't think it's here, but there's another picture with Miles and Thomas Templeton, who runs the Block Bitcoin miner team, and there's who else was it? Mike Brock and forgetting somebody. But anyway, yeah, it was a whole group of them. But Miles was there.
Yeah.
Miles was great. It's funny because he's doing everything with Cash App and Bitcoin, and that's actually what I use quite a bit, and really really love it. And so a good group of people who came out with Jack.
Yeah, it was fun seeing him in Argentina. I didn't know he was going to be there, so just ran into him at the HRF dinner. So
Miles is great, and I think actually seeing people had heard about what we were doing, but it was very fresh at that time. And so for him and Jack and others, they're seeing it and they're like, oh. And if you ever get a chance to come to Kenya, we'll show it to you too.
Oh, I'm definitely coming.
People who come to or Malawi or Zambia, they see it and they're like, oh, and it's like you kind of intellectually understand it when you're sitting in the US or Europe or wherever you are listening to me on a podcast, sure. But you get there and you can actually see the people using the power. You can talk to them directly and say, how's it having power at your home? And I think Bitcoin Shooter made the best little short on this. It was like a 4-minute short. And he's just talking to the people around one of our sites and saying, how's your life changed? What's going on now? And you just hear them talk about it. And all of a sudden there's this like realization of what energy does for you and how it can, like the story of human progress is the story of energy.
Yeah.
Right. And this, you cannot have the things that we have in life without this base layer of energy being there.
Well, you look at the maps of where the energy consumption, and the places where there's high levels of poverty, there's very little energy consumption. The places where the standard of living is very high have high levels of energy consumption.
So we've all seen that chart, which with like the bubbles of each country, and there's no such thing as a energy poor rich country.
Yeah.
Right. But here's something that'll probably be surprising to you. In the continent of Africa with 1.1 to 1.2 billion people, we use 5.5 times less energy than the U.S. with 300 million people.
That does not surprise me at all.
Right. So the whole continent.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what's kind of a big shocking number. You're like, oh my goodness. So of course humans have progressed further and faster in places that have cheaper and more energy. And so, if we really want to see that change happen in Africa, we just need to build energy.
Yeah.
Everything else comes after that. Build energy and make it available and make it cheaper. Right. That's all you need to do. You do those things. Humans around the world can figure out their own problems. Right. You give them those basic tools, And then, you see it happen. Like, I mean, we talked about it earlier. You see irrigation happen all of a sudden. Okay, so now I can grow more grain. The other thing is the grain mills show up. They were walking 20 kilometers before to get to a grain mill, and now they can have one about 500 meters away. You can have, the clinics can be open at night. And by the way, they can refrigerate their medicine.
Yeah.
Okay, both of those change lives drastically. At school, the school kids now can have LED lights at home to study with instead of paraffin lamps and getting lung problems. Like the security increases, so people who are trying to walk at night aren't, having as many issues. Like it just changes every facet of life. So if like Bitcoin is this amazing tool for savings. Bitcoin is this amazing tool for, usage. It's this amazing tool for all these money issues. And even though Bitcoin mining is probably the most boring of the things that we talk about with Bitcoin, it can probably do more for the progression of humans in this world than anything else because it brings energy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's in contrast to what I feel like the world is. The elites are pushing right now. They want these countries to consume less or to consume, very expensive forms of energy. And it's like they say they want to alleviate poverty, but they're fighting against the very source that can alleviate it.
It's a pessimistic view of the world, right? Where you don't think you don't think you can come up with a new innovation to make it better, right? And in Bitcoin mining is an example of human ingenuity, and it makes a splash in different ways in different markets in different parts of the industry, right? In energy, it's really hard for big money and big energy to understand Bitcoin because it's got this label to it that people are worried it's not going to be there. It doesn't have any value. But I can show you, 2.5 years now of real data that shows you how it changes people's lives and actually makes it financially viable to build energy, right? And to run that energy. And so we should be seeing massive amounts of money coming into energy being built because it's a profitable enterprise and it changes people's lives for the better, right? Just one of those reasons is enough, right? But both of those things are true because Bitcoin exists. And Bitcoin exists like that in energy. So, if we have all these kind of like this degrowth mentality, it doesn't, and maybe that's the wrong way to say it. Maybe to say it like people want efficiency. And so, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you can use less energy to,
get the same results.
Yeah, in your microwave or in your fridge. I mean, sure. I mean, it's more efficient. It's like, that's good for me, right? I want that. But that doesn't have to be, mutually exclusive with more energy and more things that can be done, right? Because that's where we see real human progress, right? And so, and also, this application, the thing that actually really upsets me about it is that the West is trying to project onto Africa or other parts of the emerging markets and say, oh, because we've already reached this level, we've done all the bad things that we need to do to get here, but we've done that now. You don't get to take the same path. Yeah. You need to do carbon offsets. You need to do all these other things. And I'm like, first of all, this country doesn't have a carbon footprint worth anything, right? So what do you mean, like carbon offsets and all these other things that are basically taxes on energy production or usage, right? Like, stop that, right? Like, why don't we get to take the same path you did? Number one. Number two, like, who are you to say that we don't need as much energy as you do? That's just a really pessimistic view of the world, and it's one that is unfair.
Well, it's an entitled view that we need our standard of living, but you should
stay where you are. Yeah. So it's a really unfortunate view of the world, and hopefully we can change that, right? Like, everybody talked badly about Bitcoin mining for the longest time because it uses too much energy. Bitcoin uses too much energy. Like, yeah, maybe that's a good thing. Because it uses too much energy, or because it uses so much energy, it can be an anchor tenant. And with anchor tenancy, we can build new energy, right? That's needed in these places. And I remember having this conversation with an old friend of mine when I first got into Bitcoin mining. I was like, hey, I'm going to build this new company called Gridless. and it's going to be Bitcoin mining. And he's like, "Oh, that's really unfortunate. I'm sad to hear that you're doing that." I was like, "What? Like, what kind of response is that? Like, that's not encouraging." And he's like, "Well, yeah, most of these people have only read the titles for the reports on how energy usage by Bitcoin is bad. They don't understand or disagree with the thesis that the use of energy securing the Bitcoin network and creating the value of Bitcoin has any value. So they don't agree with that thesis. So those two things being true means that they're not well read enough, and they don't understand what Bitcoin's value is, right? So I said, well, let me just give you a different view of these things. Imagine you're sitting in a rural village in Africa, and you have to use a lamp at night to study. If this energy comes in, and it can come in because Bitcoin mining is on your energy site that's nearby, now you can turn on an LED light bulb. You can now have refrigerated medicine at the hospital. When the baby gets born at night, it doesn't have to be done with flashlights from a phone, right? Is that not more valuable itself than your moral equivalency on whether or not Bitcoin is the right thing for the world, or that these people need energy at all, right? He's like, okay, well, that's different. Like, okay, well, it's a beginning, right? So that's a first step on the path of explaining that, Bitcoin can be a good thing in the world, and it is a good thing in the world if you'll let it have its space to be so.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's a good point to wrap up on. But I am interested for you to give us a tease on what direction Gridless will be going. You kind of mentioned that you guys have done some of the legwork on what it would cost to actually go out and build your own power sites. And so is that something that you guys are moving in that direction? Are you guys, looking to raise funds that people can reach out to?
Sure, I'll shill my company on this.
Please, shill away.
So Gridless is building out a subsidiary called Gridless Energy. We have 3 sites, 2 in Malawi and 1 in Kenya, that we've done feasibility studies on and are ready to build. They range between 500 kilowatts to 2 megawatts, all hydro. And so, we're raising a financing round for Gridless Energy that will be held in Bitcoin and never touched, leveraged against, though, to build these sites. So Gridless Energy will be the first, we think, at least that we know of, Bitcoin financed and Bitcoin mining for profitability energy company.
And are you raising denominated in Bitcoin?
We can. So we can do it either way. So if somebody gives us dollars, we just turn it into Bitcoin. If they give us Bitcoin, we keep it in Bitcoin.
And how much are you guys looking to raise?
We're raising 20 million. 20
million.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So our numbers, are just like the kind of the quick.
So pretty soon that'll be about 200 Bitcoin. So.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, man, I need to raise that money now. Like, we're losing out on the value creation. It sounds like a lot of money to people at first, but Bitcoin mining is a capex heavy business, and so is energy. So we need a certain amount of money to make it work. We can definitely do it with a little bit less. It'll just take us. Our bellwether is our race to 100 megawatts of energy, and so we could do it with $5 million, but it would take us like 20 years. If we do it with $20 million, it'll take us 10.
And so you guys, when you do these power generation sites, will it be kind of the same model, like you're Bitcoin mining when there's not other demand for it?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we get 100% usability from day one, right? So as soon as we switch that energy on, it's 100% Bitcoin mining. And then what we do is make that energy available to the community so that they can use it as well. And as that community builds up its usage of that energy, we move those Bitcoin miners that are extra now to other sites.
So you guys also have to build out the actual grid in those communities, or you bring somebody else in?
So we're not building the grid.
Okay.
We're partnering with others who do. We just want to be at energy development and Bitcoin mining. Those are the two things that we do.
So you'll wholesale energy to the grid operator.
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
That keeps it simpler than
it's
having
a lot
to deal
simpler.
with.
One of my favorite things about Bitcoin mining is that there's no customers, no customer service, and no marketing.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like with adding energy, there is a customer and that there'd be a mini grid partner, but I don't have to like actually go out there and do customer service, all these other things that, make Bitcoin mining so attractive to me.
Well, coming from the food service industry for a long time, I definitely see the attraction of having that.
I know, like after running like a 100+ person team running this network across Kenya, Rwanda, other countries, it's like, and coming to this and saying, oh wait, it's really only about having an operationally efficient team, right? That's all this is. So we can all just really be good at our jobs. We can do like a 10 person or less company, and that's what we do. We do with 10 people, we can run 6 sites across 3 countries.
Yeah.
Like that I love, right? And I think energy will obviously change that. It's heavier capex, heavier opex, but still manageable.
Yeah. Well, Erik, I appreciate you not only being willing to come on the podcast, but also making the jump on a moment's notice to come up here to El Salvador and see Bitcoin country.
Yeah, no, Mike, thanks so much for introducing me to El Salvador and being a guest here in El Zonte. This is amazing what you built, and just wandering around the town paying with Bitcoin has been a great experience.
Pretty amazing, huh?
It's kind of like
Bitcoin
like we don't have any circular economies like this in Kenya, and I can see how they could be built now. So it's really inspirational. You've done a really phenomenal job here.
Oh, it's been a blast to be a part of. Where can people find you? How can they follow you?
So gridlesscompute.com, at gridlesscompute on Twitter, and then I'm at White African on Twitter.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, now that you're here and you've seen it, you'll have to bring your wife with you next time.
I know. I don't have any excuses anymore.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll call it a night here. We got a big week ahead of us with the conference.
I know. I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
All right, thanks.